I'm joined now by Michael Steele, who used to run the Republican Party and endorsed Joe Biden this past cycle, Sally Cohn, a progressive activist, and Heather McGhee, co-chair of Color of Change and the author of the forthcoming The Sum of Us, What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together, out next month. Heather, I give you the floor.
This week has been an example of both the beauty and the potential and the power of the American experiment. A multiracial coalition transforming an attack that, started with, decades of voter suppression that accelerated under Brian Kemp and robbed Stacey Abrams of her seat, coming together, truly a multiracial coalition anchored by Black activists and leaders, giving the Democrats the Senate and therefore the ability to recover this economy, to address the pandemic, to address so many of the challenges we face. And then the next day, the culmination of what has really been a slow burn of this president deciding that this democracy was completely inconvenient to his aims for power. I want to be very clear that we are not out of the woods on the threat that the rise in white supremacist terror has created in this country, the threat to our democracy, the threat to human life. This is really a question. Thankfully, overnight polling from Avalanche has shown that 62% of Americans want Donald Trump impeached and removed. That 71% say that the people I hope don't get off in this, the GOP members who incited attacks, should resign or be censured. The enablers of this president's attack on the foundations of our country are widespread. And the fact that there are people who were sort of at the tip of the spear, who actually committed the violence, who have still not been arrested, gives, good citizens in this country no peace. But at the same time, there are people in media, there are people at the top of corporations, and there are hundreds of politicians, including 147 Republicans, who have just as much responsibility for enabling the lies and the conspiracy theory out of a short-term political gain that need to be held accountable as well.
Michael?
I think I just really narrated very well and summed up this week for so many of us. I want to speak for a moment as a native Washingtonian, born and raised in the city, grew up in Petworth. The high school I attended literally is a couple of miles down North Capitol Street. And for me to watch those scenes unfold were horrifying, but even more disturbing and quite honestly disgusting was my fellow Americans who were engaged in this. My fellow citizens who instead of whatever grievances they have, presenting them the way we have in the past. And as we've seen, even over the past year with peaceful marches, not having to, go after and attack members of Congress and destroy the Capitol itself, just really sent, I think, to the points that Heather made, sort of a resonating reality that there is out there a lot that we need to attend to. That we have to begin to speak as citizens about who we are and why it matters and why this matters. Why does this matter so much? Because if it doesn't matter to you, we are done. We are done. But the fact that the polling is starting to reflect that it does matter, that people want these elected officials like Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz to be held accountable for those who stood with this president on those platforms the day of this violence and egged on that crowd to Capitol Hill, they need to be held accountable. He needs to be impeached. He needs the 25th Amendment to be applied if impeachment isn't the way. But we cannot allow for and take the risk that the next 12 days will just be okay. That somehow, because the president gave a well-written, timed, planned speech last evening that he did not believe. We've been in this room before. We saw it after Charlottesville. He gave a well-timed and planned speech after that when the brouhaha occurred to try to quell the moment. Well, you're not going to quell this moment with a nice speech. The only way this moment is quelled is by your removal. because that's what the Constitution requires when you are inept in your job and you violate its tenets.
I hear that.